And our speaker today is John Goldsmith. For many years, he has served as a radio personality. Currently, he is the volunteer curator for the DeMoulin Museum, which he founded in 2010. He is very passionate about sharing the story of the DeMoulin brothers. Being a Rhodes Scholar allows him the opportunity to pack up his gear and share his brand of edutainment to communities throughout Illinois, which we are big fans of as well. So everyone, please welcome John Goldsmith.
Thank you, Emma. So I've got a few questions for you before we get started. How many of you have been to a program here before? Okay. I will guarantee you that this is the weirdest program you will ever see at this place. Next question. How many of you were in marching band? Okay. How many of you ever rode a goat in a fraternal lodge? Okay. Let me try another question. How many of you graduated from high school before 1982? I figured I'd have a little better response on that question. Okay. So those questions all pertain to the program today. The DeMoulin Brothers Company was founded in 1892 in Greenville. How many of you have been to Greenville? Good. They're my ringers in the crowd today. Greenville is in southern Illinois. We're on Interstate 70 down in Bond County. And DeMoulin Brothers, or was founded in 1892. They were our first industry in our community. They're still in business today. They make marching band uniforms, and they make them for schools all around the United States. They also do show choir apparel and flag gear and other things like that. That is not how this company got their start. And I'm going to tell their story. I'm going to share with you some of the strange things that they've done along this journey. And before I go any further, I do want to introduce my special guests, who are Mike Huey and his wife Kathy. And Mike is actually a descendant of one of the DeMoulin brothers. He's a descendant of Erastus DeMoulin. So they are rock stars in my world. And so it's a pleasure to have you both. Thanks for coming today. And I told them I'm going to try to tell some stories maybe they haven't heard before. So with that, we will jump into the program and get underway. With three Frenchmen and a goat, the DeMoulin brothers story. These gentlemen are the three Frenchmen. Erastus DeMoulin, U.S. DeMoulin, Edmund DeMoulin. They were actually first-generation born Americans. Their father and his family, they immigrated from France to southern Illinois in 1850. So these are the DeMoulin brothers in the company's name. Ed DeMoulin was actually the founder. The family came from a tiny little burg called Sebastopol, which was a town of maybe about 100 people. They had the blacksmith shop. Erastus DeMoulin, the oldest of the three brothers, was a master blacksmith. That plays a role into this company's history. They also had the general store and the post office. So if you had the blacksmith shop, the general store, and the post office in a town of 100, you basically had all of the commercial business. And there's Elisha DeMoulin, that was their father. So this is where the brothers grew up, in this tiny little burg of Sebastopol. It's about 17 miles southwest of where Greenville is. Ed DeMoulin was the founder of the company. There's Ed right there, some interesting factoids. He moved to Greenville in the fall of 1886, opened a photo studio, so photography was his vocation initially. He received his first patent in August of 1892 for a camera attachment that allowed double exposure, what he called freak photography. He loved gadgets and technology of his day. He was the first person in Greenville to own a car. He founded his lodge paraphernalia business at the urging of William A. Northcott, who we'll talk about in a moment. He was a four-term Greenville mayor. So this guy that moved to Greenville from Sebastopol in November of 1886, within about 10 to 15 years, had left a pretty major stamp on our community. So photography was the first business. 1892 is when he launches the second business that's still around today, but it was originally a maker of things for fraternal lodges. This is the patent that I referred to, and this is this freak photography patent. And he'd been experimenting with trick photography, or freak photography as he called it. He received the patent in August of 1892, and boy, this was big news in Greenville. In 1893, he sold one of these to a doctor living in Bombay, India. That, my friends, is front page news for Greenville in 1893. So what exactly is this freak photography thing? Here's an example. I love this picture. That looks like two different people, right? It's not. That's U.S. DeMoulin, the younger brother, both sitting and standing. Yeah, so this attachment allowed him to take two separate images of the same person and meld them into one photo. And there were a number of examples of this where it looked like kind of like twins, but both those images were of the younger brother, U.S. DeMoulin. That photo, we actually have the original, and it's on display at the museum. I mentioned Northcott, and he plays an important part in the founding of this company. He was our state's attorney from 1882 to 1892. He was also the Illinois Lieutenant Governor. More importantly, he was the head counsel of the Modern Woodmen of America. Anyone ever heard of the MWA, Modern Woodmen of America? It was a fraternal organization that sold insurance. They were founded in Iowa in the 1880s, and this Greenville man became essentially the national president of this group. They were primarily in the Midwest, and Northcott wanted to grow this. Did we lose the mic again? I'm going to keep talking, and I'll be super loud. I can do that. Northcott wanted to grow the Modern Woodmen of America into a larger fraternal organization. The golden era of fraternalism is the 1890s through the end of World War I up through the early part of the 1920s. So Northcott is in charge of this group, the Modern Woodmen of America. He'd like to grow it into one of the more important, larger fraternal organizations. And so he says to Ed DeMoulin, this guy that just recently got this patent for this freak photography thing, so he knows that Ed DeMoulin's a creative guy. He asks Ed, you know, how can I grow the Modern Woodmen of America into a big player like the Oddfellows or the Masons? And so Ed consulted his two brothers, and they came back with lodge initiation. Fun in the lodge room. And so in the early years, Northcott was a silent partner in the first 2 or 3 years of this company's existence. U.S. DeMoulin was the second brother to join. He moved to Greenville, became Ed's partner on February 13th, 1895. That's an important date because it was a Friday the 13th. And U.S. DeMoulin chose that date because he wanted to prove to the world, I'm not superstitious. So I'm going to join this company on Friday the 13th. He was the co-founder of Greenville's concert band in 1896. Aha, that's how the company got into the band uniform business. 4 years after their founding, they made one set of band uniforms for our local municipal band, and they realized, ooh, there's a market for band uniforms. Anybody familiar with the Music Man? Okay. That's what America was like, especially here in the Midwest. Every town, and it made no difference how small you were, you could have 6 guys that got together on a street corner on Saturday night. That was your town band. And they realized there was a market for band uniforms. So that's how that got started. U.S. DeMoulin was well-read, often spoke on a variety of topics. He would later donate the land that became the site of our hospital, and he had no children by his choice. There's Rass, which Mike's related to Rass, was a talented blacksmith, made the first DeMoulin goats at the family blacksmith shop. Ooh, the goats, we'll talk about those in a moment. He moved to Greenville in 1901, was the plant superintendent. He's the behind-the-scenes guy. Ed and U.S. are the guys that are the face of the company. They're the ones that are out and about in the community. Erastus DeMoulin is just happy to be back in the plant, working with the guys, making some of the things that you're going to see here in just a moment. When we talk about fraternal lodges and fraternal orders that the company made things for, this is just a sampling. Modern Woodmen of America, Woodmen of the World, Oddfellows, Knights of Pythias, Improved Order of Red Men, Order of Eastern Star, Rebecca, Royal Neighbors of America, Degree of Pocahontas, Fraternal Order of Eagles. Is there anybody on that list that anyone's ever heard of before? Okay. Does anybody in this room belong to any of these groups? Okay. And a lot of them were the ladies' auxiliary groups to the group that the gentleman would belong to. The factory marketed these things for the fraternal lodges through catalogs. And in the 1890s, that's a pretty good business plan. What companies in the 1890s were having great success selling things with catalogs? That's it. And U.S. DeMoulin was the one that said, hey, we need to be patterning our catalogs, do catalog sales, have a catalog pattern specifically to that fraternal order. And they borrowed some money from the local bank to pay for printing and postage of their first catalog. And within about 4 or 5 weeks, they were inundated with orders from modern Woodmen of America organizations, chapters. And so that's the reason why they did catalog sales. So we talk about the goats. Ah, there they are. The bucking goat. What? That's a good response. The fuzzy wonder. A low-down buck. And we've got one more, I think, coming. There it is, the Ferris wheel goat. Fun in the lodge room. Fun in the lodge room. This is a catalog page. I'll pass this around. You guys can take a look at it. In fraternalism, there has been an expression around forever. Someone's going to ride the goat tonight. Oh, you're going to join the lodge? You're going to have to ride the goat. These brothers took this expression and they made it a literal thing. They made these goats. What I like to compare them to, if you remember about 40 years ago when the John Travolta movie Urban Cowboy came out, and you remember every bar in this country had a mechanical bull? These guys are the great-grandfather of the mechanical bull. And the way they work in the lodge is the man that's being initiated is blindfolded, placed on top, and given a goat ride. And that's part of their initiation. This guy, Ferris wheel coaster goat, you strap the guy, harness the guy to the goat, you blindfold him, and you push, and he rides the goat like this. We've got this on display at the museum, and kids really want to ride that thing. We do have a goat that they can ride. It's not that one. And you know what, to be honest with you, I'm not sure that our insurer would allow us to strap a kid to a Ferris wheel goat. As we go through this section, keep in mind, this is a company that today makes marching band uniforms. This is how they got their start. The low-down buck was the last one they made. That was the 1920s. We do have one of those in our collection at the museum. That was patented by U.S. DeMoulin in 1922. He filed the patent in 22. The patent was received in 23. There's a lot of incredible mechanical ingenuity to these things that you're going to see. And remember that Erastus DeMoulin was a blacksmith. So in the early years, the metal undercarriage for these goats, he made at the family blacksmith shop. The undercarriage was brought by horse and wagon the 17 miles to Greenville, where they finished it out at the factory. And then later Erastus moved to Greenville and was able to do the work there. In Greenville, in the early years, DeMoulin's was called the Goat Factory. And this is an ad from 1902. Then we have the Spanker. Do I have a volunteer?
No.
This is an example of the Spanker. And you see what happens. This was their most popular initiation item that they sold. In 1910, you could buy one of these for $2 1/4 with 50 blanks. And they also did the spanking shovel and the stuff club. So basically, you blindfold the guy, you bend him over, you spank him on the bottom, this fires a blank.
That's easy. Wow.
Yeah, that's what we say it is now.
Yes, it is. But it's good old-fashioned 19th century hazing.
People didn't have rights.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because people that visit the museum, they always make that correlation with what happens on college and university campuses. This is a more sophisticated thing. Well, really it is. Come on. Because this is not meant to harm anybody. It's meant to maybe knock your ego down a notch, okay? and it's not meant to inflict physical harm. Okay? Let me tell you a couple of stories.
In grade school, we had the Board of Education.
Yeah. Hey, believe me, there are a lot of teachers that visit our museum that want to take one of these with them. A couple of things about the spanker. You always spank with the padded side because there will be some sparks that come out this side from when the blank fires.
Sounds worse than it
A little story for you. David Copperfield, you ever heard of David Copperfield, the magician? He is a collector of DeMoulin initiation devices. He's been collecting for about 30 years. About 15 years ago, he was on the Conan O'Brien show, and he brought a couple of his DeMoulin pieces with him to share on the program. Apparently, when they did the show prep, Conan O'Brien must have missed the memo, because he takes the spanker and decides, I'm going to spank David Copperfield on national television. The problem was, he spanked him with this side. And when he did, the sparks came out, and they caught Copperfield's pants on fire on national television. So remember, if you're going to use one of these at home, always spank with the padded side. Now, in fraternal orders, they were known as spankers, but they had another market for these. And the other market, circuses. Who do you think in a circus would use something like this? Clowns. Clowns called them slapsticks. Fraternal orders called them spankers. Now, right now you're thinking, boy, I wish I could get a hold of one of those because I'm ready to start my DeMoulin collection. This is one of the easiest pieces to find because I think literally they sold thousands of them. Because you can get on eBay right now, please wait till after the program, and you can probably find one of these for sale. They're on there all the time. They sold bunches of these. We've got, I think, probably 5 or 6 in our collection. So this is the spanker that was used in the fraternal order. And let's take a look at some other goodies here. The lifting and spanking machine. In 1924, you could buy that for $35.
Back with this?
According to the catalog, the spanking paddle springs into place and strikes the victim on the kazabo. The language in the catalogs are just splendid. And a lot of it is, the old-timey language. Kazabo is not a word that we use every day. But, I would love to demonstrate this on somebody's kazabo today. So, how about one of the staff? One of the staff want to come up? Boy, have you ever seen the staff run that fast? There we go.
That's why I get paid the big bucks.
There you go. Thank you.
What a good sport.
So, in the fraternal order, and your name is, I forgot.
Timothy.
Timothy.
My name is Philip. My name is Philip.
Okay. It's a wise decision to change your name in this. So, Philip would have been blindfolded and escorted to this platform and brought up there.
Is the blindfold an option?
There you go. And they would point Philip in this direction. And they would tell Philip that, okay, we know you're blindfolded, you can't see anything, you know that you're standing on a platform. We're going to test your strength to see if you're strong enough and man enough to belong to this fraternal order. So you're going to bend over. You got a great view of this. You're going to bend over on the count of 3. When you feel 2 metal handles, you're going to pull up on them, and we're going to see how strong you are. On the count of 3, are you ready? 1,
Can I take my glasses off?
2, 3. Pull up. Oh, hey, there it is. I think that deserves a round of applause.
Thank you, fellow.
So you just witnessed someone being spanked on their kazabo. This was one of their best sellers. They sold a bunch of these to the fraternal lodges. And a little aside, at the museum, we do a lot of school tours. And what's interesting is, going back to our earlier topic, you can't spank kids in school. But you can load them up in a yellow bus, and you can bring them to the DeMoulin Museum, and you can show them this, and they'll spank themselves.
I can see that, for sure.
Over and over and over, more than once. And that's no joke. Once you show the kids this, there's a line of 10 kids that want to try it.
Yeah, especially boys.
So that's the lifting and spanking machine. We have, there's the patent for the lifting and spanking machine, the US DeMoulin. Again, look at all the intricate work that goes into this. So something that looks deceptively simple is a lot of mechanical ingenuity to it. The other thing I want to mention is the pieces that you're going to see demonstrated, for the most part, we don't restore. When we find things, you're seeing them in the same condition as they left the factory 100 years ago. In this instance, we did replace the paddle, but everything else is original. All of the actual inner workings are the original pieces. Hoodwinks. This was an important part of the initiations. They were a special blinder or a goggle that was created, and I've got a pair of those I'll show you. This was patented by Ed and US DeMoulin in 1896, and they modified it in 1905. And a lot of these initiation devices where you had to be blindfolded, like the lifting and spanking machine, you would have these goggles. And what's interesting about them is you can lift them up and they can see red, or you can lift them up and you can see clear, or just have them completely blinded. So those are the Hoodwinks. One of my favorites, the invisible paddle machine.
Oh.
There's a lot going on with this piece. In 1924, you could buy it for $33.50. I love this. The catalog claims the results obtained are really wonderful. The candidate, you don't have to blindfold them because you can't tell what's going to happen. You just think you're picking up on the handles, and there's a dial there that looks like they're measuring your strength. You pick up on the handles, it shoots water in your face, it spanks you on the bottom, and it fires a blank. That's like a buffet, isn't it?
Yeah, boy.
The Traitor's Judgment Stand, another cool piece. There are a couple of versions that were available with a velour carpet and fringe, or a cheaper carpet with no fringe. In 1910, that's $9.50 or $8.25. They would upsell you any way they could. Even with a piece like the lifting and spanking machine, you could get carpet with fringe, a fancy carpet, basic carpet. The other thing that was neat about this is there was another attachment they could sell you. Again, it's always about upselling. And the other attachment on this piece was a box that's about this size. It's got some gears and coils in it. And what would happen is it was underneath one of the handles, and when you'd pick up, it would shock you in one hand. So that was the upgrade for that piece. There's the patent for this piece. It was patented, as I said, by Ed and US. That's the early version. They did a modification a few years later that worked a little bit better. It's a little smaller, and we do have one of those in our collection at the museum as well. The trick chair. This is a great piece. You sit in the chair, it collapses, fires a blank, and rings a bell. There's the cost in 1910. And again, you're saying to yourself right now, this is the company that makes marching band uniforms today.
Yeah, who knew?
The lung tester, which I will demonstrate for you in a little bit. In 1908, you could buy that for $10. It was one of their best sellers, and it was one of their earliest inventions. And like a lot of pieces, they had an early version, and they modified it, fine-tuned, and they'd have a second version a little later. A lot of these fraternal organizations, I'll give Oddfellows as an example. You had to pass a simple physical to be accepted into the Oddfellows. And the Oddfellows would have a physician or a doctor who was part of the lodge and would administer the lung test. And so you're being told that we're going to test your lungs and test your health and make sure that you don't have tuberculosis. So you blow into the mouthpiece, this would shoot flour back in your face and it fires a blank. And I'll demonstrate that for you at the end. And then the guillotine.
Oh my God.
Wow. I really got to look at you.
You're enjoying this a little too much.
Heard they-
You've got to come to the museum. I said that the brothers were of French descent. The guillotine was invented in what country?
France.
France. All right. Here's all the information on it. So how this works in the lodge is they would tell the candidate for initiation, I'll pick on this fine-looking gentleman right here. What's your name? Bob. Okay, Bob. Bob, we've given this a lot of thought. We don't think you're the right person for our lodge. We think that you're a scoundrel and a liar and a cad.
Oh, no.
Would she agree with that?
Oh, God, yes.
I always pick the right one. I don't know how that happens. And we think that the worst part is you are going to leave our fraternal order and share all of our lodge secrets. So Bob, right? Bob, we're not going to allow you to leave this building alive. So they grab Bob and they drag him over and they strap him in the guillotine. The guillotine, as used by the French, where you're looking up or looking down, is they cut your head off. Down. The DeMoulins made you look up. The executioner, wearing a robe made by the factory, of course, picks up the blade comes down, it fires a blank, and it stops about this far from your head. The trick is there's a block of wood that goes up with the blade on each side, comes down with the blade, and hits a set of springs. So that's as far as it will possibly go. That was not a popular seller for the company. And the great story is here on the bottom. They sold one to a lodge in East St. Louis in the 1920s. About a week later, the guillotine came back with a letter requesting a refund because it was just too creepy. Today, in 2023, that is our most popular piece with kids. They all want their picture taken in the guillotine. So if you're on Facebook and you see kids in a guillotine, they probably were taken at the DeMoulin Museum. There have been dozens of photos over the years taken of this. Now let's talk about band uniforms. As I said, the first band uniforms were in 1897 for the Greenville Concert Band. The earliest customers were the community bands, fraternal bands, military bands. The university that they've had the longest relationship with is U of I. And they've been making their uniforms since the 20s. We have a uniform that the U of I donated to the museum in 2015. But they've made uniforms for schools all over the United States. They had a furniture division until 1955 that manufactured furniture for churches and lodges. And there's still some of these pieces being used today. We occasionally get phone calls, especially rural churches. Like we had a call a few years ago from a rural church, I think it was in Idaho, that still had some furniture that was made by the factory. Collection plates, furniture. So that was also part of their business. They closed that division in 1955. The cap and gown choir robe division ran from the 20s until 1982. 82 was the year they sold that division off. That's the reason why I asked the question about if you graduated from high school before 82. There's a good chance that you may have worn a cap and gown made by this company, or if you were in choir, in church, or in school prior to 82, you probably wore a choir robe made by them as well. So if you think about it, let's say in the 1930s, they're still dabbling in the fraternal stuff. They're making band uniforms, they're making furniture, they're making caps and gowns, choir robes, they're doing things for circuses. So at one time, they had a lot of stuff going on at that plant. Here's what the factory looked like from 1896 to 1907. The picture there was in 1896, right after it was built. And they had operated a few different locations in their early years. That entire building was lost to a fire in 1907. And actually, that photo doesn't do it justice. They added on to that building a couple of more times. So by the time the building burnt to the ground in 07, it was a large, large building that sat along the railroad tracks. The fire was caused by an engine in the basement. They had a gas engine that ran all the machinery throughout the building. There was a flash fire. This thing was gone in an hour. Thankfully, nobody was killed and nobody was seriously hurt. And they rebuilt on the same location. In October of 1907, they opened this building. This is the same building they're in today. They've added on to it a number of times. The old brick is now covered with siding, but they're still operating out of basically a 1907 era building. And I dedicate this program to my mom, and here's the reason why. I am not a DeMoulin. I have never worked a day of my life at this factory, but over the last 23 years, I have become the company historian and kind of the family genealogist as well. And this lady is the reason why. In 2000, my mom decided to get serious about collecting DeMoulin stuff, which she had dabbled with. Even though she was an employee, she was a seamstress, it became her hobby. And she decided to suck little Johnny Goldsmith into this hobby. And over time, it became just a passion for both of us. When my mom passed away in 2007, I inherited her collection and I just kept adding on to it. The museum opened in 2010, so we've been open for 13 years. And we get visitors from all around the United States and all around the world, not to see band uniforms, but to see this kind of weird, quirky stuff. So let's show you a few things, and then I'll open up to a little Q&A. Catalogs, I brought a couple with me. This is an example of an Oddfellows catalog. There's an example of a band uniform catalog. I'll pass those around. I'll start one on this side, start one on this side. Feel free to thumb through there. Band uniforms. I'll tell you what, let's back up here. It was an easy transition for this company to get into the band uniforms because they were making regalia for the fraternal lodges, which were the outfits that they wore. This is an example of a Woodman of the World jacket, early 1900s. This is for a group called the Improved Order of Red Men, IORM. This was a lodge that sold insurance, and they patterned their chapters after Native American tribes. And so they would dress as Native Americans in these fanciful Indian-inspired outfits made by the factory. We've got about 20 different outfits in our collection. These are among my favorite things that they made, not politically correct today, but pretty cool outfits. So this is what they did initially in the textiles. So when they started making the band uniforms in the late 1890s, they already had everybody in place to make band uniforms. So that was an easy transition. Band uniforms, I brought just a few. This is one we just added to our collection. It was brought into our local thrift shop the other day. This is from Highland, Illinois. This uniform was made in 1963. There's a bib. There's the bib. We haven't even had a chance to put the bib on it yet. And there it is. Okay, there's that. This is a little more recent. This is probably early 90s from Carlisle, Illinois. And then we'll show you what they're doing today. This is the look of today. You'll note that there's no embroidery. This is a dye sublimation where they dye basically the colors. They dye what would be before would have been embroidered. It's dyed into the material. So this is it's a common popular look for today. I call it almost space age, it's just, the ladies that have worked at the company for a long time or the retirees, they're not a fan of this because it doesn't have the embroidery. But the schools love it and the kids love it, and so this is the look of today. Yes, who said that? You're right. Yeah. And if you were to come to the museum, we have the band uniforms set up so that you can see how they've evolved over time. Our oldest band uniform is from around 1900 up through today. And the styles change and they reflect the tastes and the styles of the era. Okay, let's...
If you watch like the Rose Bowl parade,
Uh-huh.
the Macy's
Yep.
parade, you'll just notice those
Yep.
schools,
and
those types of uniforms.
I'm glad that you brought that up because the ladies and the gentlemen that have worked there over the years, that's what they look forward to every year. Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, Rose Bowl Parade, because they're always going to see some of their work on national television. That means a lot to them. And not everybody can say that when you're in a manufacturing field, just say, hey, I saw what I worked on TV. All right, we're going to do, hey, you want to be initiated today? All right, cameraman, come on up. You're the guy.
But thank you for the offer.
Well, it was my pleasure to offer it to you. Come on up. This guy's been phenomenal to work with, doing all the sound and the video, and so, the least I can do is initiate him today is a thank you. All right, so we're going to test your strength. You would not be blindfolded in this. You just see a dial there, and you're going to put your feet on the bars down at the bottom. Are you all ready for this?
Oh, no.
You're going to be so glad you sat in the front. On the count of 3, you're going to pull up on those handles, and we're going to see how strong you are. Let's count it together. 1, 2, 3. Pull. Hey, good job. On a hot day, that actually feels pretty good. That's the lifting and spraying machine. And then other thing I wanted to show you was the box. These are still being used today by fraternal lodges, the ballot box. So this is a real simple question. Basically, what color are the marbles?
White and black.
White and black, okay.
Oh, yes.
So in a fraternal lodge, you would be given one of each, and whatever it is you were going to do a secret vote on, you would vote yes or no. Do you think a white marble is a yes vote or a no vote?
I would normally say yes.
Then
but-
let's stop right there. Right. It's a yes vote. This is a no vote. You've been blackballed. Comes from this. So the way it works is you pick out your vote. There's a little notch right there. You drop it in that notch. It falls over to the other side, and you count them up. And if there were 3 black balls, you're out. Okay? Or it would depend. Some of them were less than that. And you'll notice it's got the DeMoulin label. This company did a marvelous job labeling almost everything that they made. Who's ready to see the last one? You ready to see this? I'm going to have to, I'll do it right here, and hopefully y'all get a good look at it. And then you're going to see why I always leave this till the end. Cameraman, you got that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So this is the lung tester. And just to refresh your memory on this, the person that's being initiated, the lodge physician is administering the lung test, and you tell the guy you're going to blow into the mouthpiece, we're going to test your lungs, test your health, and to make sure you don't have tuberculosis. And tell you what, let me do one thing. Let me move this so everybody gets a good look at it. Oop. You know it's good if I'm taking the glasses off. All right, let's see how she works today. Now you see why I wait till the end to do that one? Quick story. One day we had 5th graders at the museum, and I demonstrated that piece. And right after I did it, and I got this stuff all over my face, I hear this little 5th grade voice say, "Oh, is that cocaine?" No, it's not. I never had forgotten that. It was a pleasure being here today. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you. Thank you for hosting. This is a phenomenal facility. I encourage you to support what they're doing here. As a museum guy, I love to go see other places, and I appreciate, right now you can't take me seriously with this on my face, can you? But do, please support them in what they do. And if you're interested, I do have some promotional cards from the museum. If you ever find yourself down in Greenville, Illinois, help yourself to one of those. And if you want to spank yourself before you go, we'll set that up too. Thank you very much. It was a pleasure having you here today.